Clemson loses yet again. Yet another game in Death Valley where the fans come. Tailgate. I was really impressed when I got there at how lively the tailgate scene still is and how loud the crowd was at times. And just the pageantry is still alive. The fans deserve better, but they haven't seen a home win against a Power 4 team since Virginia in October of 2024. So really rough times at Clemson. Meanwhile, Florida State goes to Stanford, loses in the middle of the night in a really disappointing game that's marked a big fall from grace for Florida State after beating Alabama and thinking that they were back. Quite the opposite. Mike Norvell's days could be numbered. So I want to talk about this Clemson game and then the programs at large and sort of how they tie together a little bit. And I'm going to be frank about this. I've been doing this since 2013, whether it's writing or recording videos, and I've never had to cover an actually bad Clemson team. Some teams have been great, won national championships, and others have been just good or even just okay, but I've never had to cover a bad one. So bear with me as I try to be blunt but not disrespectful. Join in the comments. Tell me how I did. Tell me your thoughts. But I'm going to dive in, and I picked Clemson to lose to SMU at home because they don't win home games and because Cade Klubnik was out. I thought Vizina would struggle. And early on, especially in that first quarter, he did. He looked really bad. And as the game went on, he settled in, but also the play calling opened up for him. I thought they were really conservative early on. But by the end of the game, it was clear that he wasn't the issue for the offense. The offense scored 24 points, which isn't great, but that's because they lost the battle in the trenches. They had 35 rushing yards, 1.2 yards per carry. They gave up 139, allowed 5 yards per carry. And when I think about teams that can come into Clemson and win in Death Valley, usually if it's not, Florida State in 2013 or, a big time matchup like that, then it's generally going to be a team that has a quarterback play out of his mind, a receiver goes off, some flukes on special teams, something crazy like that. I think back to that Pitt game. Clemson had all sorts of crazy turnovers, and Pitt nailed a crazy kick in a high-scoring affair. It was, I don't want to say it was fluky, but it was weird. This wasn't weird. SMU was the better team throughout, and honestly, it was Clemson making those weird plays. They converted a 4th and 23, 4th and goal from the 23 when Vizina hit transfer Tristan Smith on a long touchdown. Not to say that was a fluke play, but it was Clemson coming up with those big plays in unlikely moments just to stay in it. And then the defense couldn't complement them, right? The offense was bad early, but the defense held strong. And then as soon as the offense got going, the defense sort of fell apart and gave up 35 points. Really just not playing complementary football. A couple quick notes. I thought Vizina was good. I don't know if this closes the book on an offseason decision to get a transfer quarterback. If they're going to be elite again, you probably should go out and find someone like Duke did with Darian Mensah. But is that the number one problem? I think absolutely not. I think the offensive line was again abysmal. Safety play wasn't good. Linebackers were disappointing. Those three have been a problem all season. So maybe that's the note at which we kind of leveled this up to the whole season. And I think you look at Clemson and the decisions that were made years past. There was a tweet that said Clemson didn't lose this game today. They lost it in the offseason. They lost it in the year before. They lost it in the years before that. And I think that's spot on. Offensive line may be the best, most obvious spot where very obvious at the time poor decision was made. It played out to be a poor decision. It was fixed, but the consequences of that poor decision are not gone. And that is Robbie Caldwell retires. Clemson's kind of at the peak. They have a chance, despite not being great on the offensive line during the ascendancy and peak times, go out, get a big-time elite offensive line coach and get even better. Instead, they don't. They get someone who doesn't have much experience. He's okay, slightly worse than Robbie Caldwell. The offensive line stagnates, maybe gets a little worse. And then they go out and get Matt Luke. Problem solved. But the problem's not solved. It's going to take years. His recruits are freshmen, redshirt freshmen. We saw Braden Jacobs, true freshman, look really good. We saw Ronan O'Connell, a second-year guy. He looked really good. I'm really high on him. But by and large, these are not his guys. And so you see that error has a trickle-down effect. The same error is on the transfer portal. They finally go into the portal and get a couple guys. They stick their toe in it. Does it work? Do they get comfortable with it? Yes. These three guys have been a big success. Tristan Lee, huge 23-yard catch. They should have been using him more. Jeremiah's given them depth at linebacker. They should have been using him more, and will help. Has been maybe their best. I'd probably say their second best defensive lineman all year. He's been really good. I think Stephylon Green deserves credit too, but Helt's been great. So the transfer portal's worked, but not using it in years prior. Not every guy is a 1 year, right? So they could have had some guys last year that would be back on this team, making this team better. And then you don't need as many guys this year. But as it stands, you still only got 3 guys because you're maybe not totally comfortable with the process yet. You needed more. For example, they lose Marcus Tate last year. Walker Parks wasn't good last year. And so they bet, hey, Walker Parks will get better when he's healthier. And we think that either Harris Sewell or Colin Cellar will be really good. Well, Parks hasn't been healthy. He hasn't played a ton necessarily, but he's been better. So I do want to give him some credit, but he still hasn't been healthy. So you maybe should have not bet on that. And then Sewell's not been good. And Sadler's also not been good. Now Sadler's hurt, which is unfortunate because you've got not a lot of depth. I think Ronan O'Connell's a better option, but I don't think you want to start him ideally at this stage of his career. You could have gone out and tried to get a guard, right? But they didn't try that. And I think that posture of the Clemson way is to build guys up, give them their time, put them in the crock pot, and a couple of years later, they're going to be ready to start. Can be true, but you also have to acknowledge when it's not true, and it wasn't true at guard this year. Another kind of situation is running back, where they only had basically freshmen for the most part. David Eziomume, Gideon Davidson, they didn't want to rely on them, so they could have, and I think should have, went out and got someone from the portal. Instead, they go out and they just move Adam Randall from wide receiver to running back. And I think he is very low on the list of things to blame for the failure of this season, but it's very emblematic of why, right? You could have went out and got a star. Instead, you did kind of the Clemson thing. Clemson guy. He committed to Clemson. He's from South Carolina. He's willing to sacrifice for the team. He's a good guy. I like him. And he's been okay. But John Blau posted on X a video of him on a critical short yardage situation, not seeing the hole, going, I think he went to the outside, and it gets stuffed. Another clip from John Blau is Peter Woods doing the same thing. Peter Woods, not even a running back, had 5 career carries, and he goes to the outside instead of cutting in where he had a hole and probably would have got it. And I don't blame him, right? He doesn't have the experience, but this is what happens when your number one goal is not to get the best players, right? Clark Lee at Vanderbilt's now excellent, said early on his philosophy was kind of like what Coach Swinney's is, right? Build great men, kind of do the whole crock pot thing where you develop guys over a long time, and it wasn't working, right? In the transfer portal era, he saw it wasn't working. So he had to kind of drop everything that wasn't geared towards winning now, and he went out and used the portal, and now you see the difference, right? Clemson's got to make those painful decisions that are kind of icky, but being 3-4 is also sort of icky. And so one other note on this is it's not that Clemson has never tried, right? 2 years ago, they did try to go out and get an offensive lineman. They were in on Keeneland Rutledge, who's now an all-ACC guard at Georgia Tech, but they lost that recruitment battle to Georgia Tech. And in high school recruiting, Clemson traditionally has beat up on Georgia Tech and beat up on most of these ACC schools. But you see schools like Virginia and Georgia Tech going out and making big-time moves in the portal that Clemson, by and large, hasn't done. A few exceptions, Will Held, obviously, but by and large, they haven't. And Clemson's lost more than their fair share of head-to-head battles, Keeneland Rutledge being the most notable of them. Why is that? What is it about their pitch that doesn't work with these portal kids? Maybe Clemson doesn't have the funds. I don't know. Coach Swinney hasn't said that, and maybe he needs to be blunt and say, we can't compete on the highest level unless donors step up and make this happen. If that's the case, he hasn't said it, and he's tried to pivot off of that and sort of do it his own way, the Clemson way. But that way's not working. And so now you look at what's next. And at Florida State, their decline has not been as steady. It's been up and then down and then up and then down, right? But they're pretty down. And it seems like they'll probably move on from Mike Norvell, if they can afford the buyout, that is. And I think if they can, they should. Because they have no obligation to have a protracted period of struggle, right? If they can go, Florida State should not ever lose to Stanford. They have more resources, more fans, better facilities, and more talent. That should just never happen. And if it's a one-time fluke, sure, but they've lost 9 straight ACC games. They should make a change. Clemson can't do that, and they shouldn't do that. When I left Death Valley after this loss, guy walking down outside of the valley, was kind of, it wasn't a ton of people. The game had just ended. We were kind of the first ones out, and I heard him say to his buddy, "Man, we're just one or two players away from being elite again." And I kind of like laughed, looked at my wife like, this is crazy. And I was joking with him, wasn't trying to be rude, but I was like, "Yeah, man, just a player or two away, right? Sounds familiar." And he really took exception to that. So I kind of regretted saying that. And he kind of went on this diatribe about how Dabo's done more for this program than anyone else. And he's right. And that's what makes this weird. Before I keep going on the story, don't forget to like and subscribe to this video. If you have the option, YouTube sometimes will show it. If you could hype this video, I'd really appreciate it. So back to the story. He went on to tell me about how Dabo's done more for this program than anyone else, including Danny Ford, and I think he's right. I think moving on from Swinney now is both unrealistic, it's a $60 million buyout, and unwise, because too many Clemson fans and donors just idolize him. And he's kind of earned that. He's earned the equity. I've got posters autographed, right? Like he's the greatest Clemson's ever seen. No one's done more for Clemson than him. So an analogy here, or another guy was kind of similar, or this reminds me of, is Bobby Bowden at Florida State. And so that's where these two stories tie so much together. For his last 5 seasons, Bobby Bowden lost 4 games or more. 4 games is kind of a mark where it's a bad season. There was really not much point in there where you thought you were going to have a good season. We're like halfway through this year, and we already know the year shot. Not excited about the rest of the year. That when you're having 4 loss season, that's kind of how it feels. So that's a good metric. All 5, his last 5, they waited 5 seasons of pretty much failed seasons before they let Bobby Bowden go. Several of those were 7 and 6 seasons. This will probably be Clemson's first, or I guess he had that 2010 year, but putting that aside, Dabo's first 6-loss season, if it keeps going the way it's going. But this will be only Swinney's 3rd 4-loss season. Florida State put up with 5 of them. I think that's what Clemson will, and I think that's what Clemson should put up with if this continues. I think he's got, obviously this year, I think he's got 2 more years to fix this. And there's a quote from one of the old Batman movies, and I'll quote Batman because that was the movie that they said they referenced in practice not too long ago when Batman was at the bottom of that well or cistern or whatever, and he was a prisoner and he had to climb out. So I think it's apropos to quote this. Harvey Dent says, and he says this about Batman, "You either die a hero or you live long enough to see yourself become the villain." And that's so often true of these coaches who make it for 15, 16, 17 years. This year, 17 as head coach for Coach Swinney. Philip Fulmer at Tennessee, Joe Paterno, obviously more in scandal, but him, obviously, and of course, Bobby Bowden, and there's so many more. Tom Osborne, sort of the opposite. He leaves on top of the sport, winning national championship 97 and then leaving. That's so rare. More common is steady decline, kind of leave in a weird spot, and maybe it takes a few years before you're fully beloved again. Not what you want, but sort of either way, Coach Swinney has to be the bad guy, because it's either going to be that or he's going to have to make some kind of icky decisions, right? Some of our favorite players of all time are on staff. Is he going to let them go? Is he going to tell some kid who is from South Carolina, did everything the right way, worked as hard as he possibly could, hey, it's your turn, but also you're not good enough, so I got this kid from the portal from Texas or California or Missouri or wherever, and I just paid him a lot of money to come take your spot because he's better than you, right? That doesn't feel like the Clemson way. It doesn't feel icky, or it doesn't feel good. It kind of stinks, but that's where college football is right now. And are you either going to be the bad guy for doing that, or you're going to be the bad guy for going 6-6 for the next 2 years? And so that's kind of an unenviable position, but that's where Coach Swinney is. So we're going to give him, I think, 2 more seasons, and then the buyout will go down, and we'll see. He's promised more championships. He says, hey, Clemson will win championships again. I think he's got 2 more seasons at minimum, and I think he deserves 2 more seasons. I think that's probably the right timeline. So we'll see. What do you think? Does he deserve longer than 2 seasons? Does he deserve less than that? And do you think he could deliver at least an ACC championship here in the next 2 seasons? Do they go out big in the portal? Do they go out and get 10 guys? I think 10 is probably an appropriate measure. Major changes in the coaching staff. What do you see? I think it can't just be 3-4 guys in the portal, 1 coordinator, 1 position coach. I think it's going to have to be drastic. It's not going to be the most comfortable thing in the world for Swinney or really anyone. What do you think is going to happen? Let me know. As always, go Tigers.